Welcome to another episode of Deeper Links. Today, we're diving deep into a topic that I know a lot of you have been waiting for: top red flags in women, what every man should know. And before you start thinking this is some kind of run for the hills manifesto, let me clear something up. Red flags don't mean you should instantly ditch a girl the moment you see one. It's not about hitting the eject button. It's more like those warning lights on your car dashboard. Sometimes, it's just a low fuel light, and you can keep going a little further. Other times, it's the check engine light, and if you don't handle it, well, you're going to end up stranded on the side of the road. Some red flags are small, some are huge, and not all of them are deal breakers, but they're things you should definitely be aware of. So, let's get into it. The first red flag that every man should pay attention to is when she always plays the victim. And I mean always. This is the type of woman who can never take responsibility for anything that goes wrong in her life. Every bad situation is someone else's fault. Her ex was crazy, her boss was a tyrant, her friends were backstabbers, and the list goes on. Look, everyone has a bad relationship or a rough patch at work, that's life. But if she's telling you that everyone in her past was a complete maniac and she was just a poor, innocent girl who got mistreated, you've got to ask yourself why. Why is she always the victim? Why is she always finding herself in these situations? At some point, you've got to start questioning if she's really as innocent as she claims to be, or if maybe, just maybe, she's the common denominator in all this chaos. Now, I had a buddy who ignored this red flag for way too long. He was dating this girl who, I swear, had a new enemy every week. First, it was her ex, then it was her roommate, then it was her boss, and finally, it was him. She couldn't take responsibility for anything. When they argued, it was always his fault. When she lost her job, she blamed him for not being supportive enough. When their plans didn't go the way she wanted, it was because he didn't care enough. The guy was walking on eggshells every day. He stuck around for way too long, hoping it would get better, but it didn't. It only got worse. So, my point is, if she's constantly painting herself as the helpless victim, watch out. That's a red flag, and it's going to wear you down. Next up, let's talk about no friends. If a woman has zero long-term friendships, that's a big red flag. Now, I'm not saying she has to have a million friends. Some people are more introverted, some people have smaller circles, and that's fine. But if she's got absolutely no close female friends, you've got to ask yourself why. Friendships are a reflection of how well someone can connect with others. If no one from her past has stuck around, there's probably a reason for that. And it's probably not because every other woman in the world is crazy or jealous or whatever excuse she gives you. More likely, it's because she's difficult to be around, maybe she's toxic, maybe she's the one starting drama, or maybe she's just not capable of maintaining healthy relationships. Let me give you a little example here. I dated a girl once who, at first, seemed pretty cool. But one day, I realized she didn't have a single friend she could count on. She had tons of old stories about falling out with this girl or cutting ties with that group, and at first, I didn't think much of it. Then it hit me, she was the common denominator in all these falling outs. After we broke up, thank God, I realized why she had no friends. She was manipulative, played mind games, and honestly, she was just exhausting to be around. People eventually got tired of her drama and bailed. So, fellas, if she's got no long-term friends, you've got to wonder why no one's sticking around. Now, I'm going to go ahead and talk about the dreaded daddy issues. Before anyone starts rolling their eyes, just hear me out. I'm not saying that every woman who has a complicated relationship with her dad is someone you should avoid. But if she's got unresolved daddy issues, you've got to be cautious. Daddy issues manifest in all kinds of ways. Maybe she's clingy, maybe she's got abandonment issues, or maybe she's constantly looking for validation. It's not your job to fix her or be her emotional crutch. I've seen too many guys get caught up thinking they can be the one to heal a woman's wounds, but let me tell you, that's a slippery slope. You're not her therapist, and you're not her dad. She needs to work through those issues herself, otherwise, they'll just spill into your relationship. A good buddy of mine once dated a girl who had serious daddy issues. She was clingy, always needing reassurance, and constantly afraid he was going to leave her. At first, he thought it was just because she was super into him, but after a while, he realized it was deeper than that. She had abandonment issues that went all the way back to her childhood. He stuck it out for a while, thinking he could help her feel secure, but it got to the point where her insecurities were suffocating him. He had to constantly reassure her that he wasn't going anywhere, and no matter how much he did, it was never enough. Eventually, it became too much for him, and they broke up. So, if you notice that she's got some serious unresolved issues with her dad, don't ignore it. It's a red flag that could lead to a lot of emotional baggage down the road. Let's talk about social media addiction. If she's glued to her phone, constantly posting selfies, checking likes, and obsessing over her online image, you've got a problem. A woman who's more concerned with her Instagram feed than real-life connections is someone you've got to be wary of. She's living for validation from strangers, and that's not a good sign. Social media addiction is all about ego. It's about presenting a perfect image to the world, even if that image is completely fake. And if she's more worried about how she looks to people she doesn't even know than she is about the relationship you're building, that's a huge red flag. I remember one time I was on a date with this girl, and halfway through dinner, she pulls out her phone and starts taking selfies. And I don't mean like one or two, I'm talking about a full-on photo shoot right there at the table. She spent more time trying to get the perfect shot than she did talking to me. I thought, is this really happening right now? But it didn't stop there. Every time we hung out, she was more focused on getting pictures for the gram than she was on spending quality time together. It was like I was dating her social media followers, not her. That's when I realized I was dealing with someone who cared more about online clout than real-life connections. Trust me, fellas, if she's obsessed with her social media image, you're going to take a back seat to her digital life. Now, let's talk about emotional instability. If a woman is all over the place emotionally, that's a serious red flag. I'm talking about the kind of girl who has wild mood swings. One minute she's happy, the next she's crying, and then she's angry, and you have no idea what set her off. It's like walking through a minefield. One wrong step, and boom, you're in the middle of an emotional explosion. Look, we all have bad days, but if she's constantly in emotional chaos, it's going to spill over into your life. And trust me, it's not fun. One guy I know was dating this girl who was a total emotional roller coaster. One day she'd be sweet as pie, and the next, she'd be yelling at him for some tiny thing he didn't even realize he did wrong. It got to the point where he was afraid to say or do anything because he didn't know what would set her off. It was exhausting. He tried to stick it out, thinking things would calm down, but they never did. Her emotional instability was a constant storm that made their relationship a living nightmare. So, if you notice she's got wild mood swings and can't keep her emotions in check, that's a huge red flag. It's going to drain you mentally and emotionally. Alright, moving on to financial irresponsibility. This one's a bit of a touchy subject, but it's something you need to be aware of. If a woman can't manage her money, that's a red flag. If she's always broke, always borrowing money, or living way beyond her means, you need to pay attention. I'm not saying she has to be rich or have her whole financial life together, but if she's constantly racking up credit card debt, spending money on stuff she doesn't need, and expecting you to pick up the tab, that's a problem. It's not about being stingy, it's about being realistic. Financial problems are one of the biggest stressors in relationships, and if she can't handle her finances, guess who's going to end up dealing with that stress? You. I had a buddy who was dating this girl who was always in financial trouble. She'd blow through her paycheck in a week, then come to him asking for money to cover her bills. At first, he didn't mind helping her out, but it got to the point where she was relying on him to bail her out every month. It was like she had no concept of budgeting or saving. Eventually, he realized that she wasn't going to change, and he didn't want to be her personal ATM for the rest of his life. Financial irresponsibility is a red flag that can lead to a lot of stress and resentment down the line, so don't ignore it. Let's get into cheating. This one's pretty straightforward. If she's cheated in the past, there's a good chance she's going to cheat again. Now, I'm not saying people can't change, but let's be real, if someone's crossed that line before, the odds aren't in your favor. Don't fool yourself into thinking you're going to be the guy who's different, the guy who changes her. You're not special. If she's got a history of infidelity, that's a huge red flag. And I'm not just talking about physical cheating. Emotional cheating is just as bad, maybe even worse. I knew a guy who was dating this girl who had cheated on all of her exes. He thought he was going to be the one to change her, that somehow their love was going to be different. Spoiler alert, it wasn't. She ended up cheating on him too. He was devastated, but looking back, he realized he should have seen it coming. If she's cheated before, don't think you're going to be the exception. You're probably just going to end up being another guy on her list. Another red flag you need to be aware of is when she's constantly testing you. This is the kind of woman who's always pushing your buttons, seeing how far she can go, trying to get a reaction out of you. Whether it's making you jealous, playing hard to get, or just playing mind games, this is not someone you want to be with. Relationships should be about trust, not constant tests and drama. If she's testing you in the early stages, imagine what it's going to be like down the road. I once dated a girl who was the queen of mind games. She'd purposely flirt with other guys just to see if I'd get jealous. She'd make plans with me and then cancel last minute just to see how I'd react. It was like she was constantly trying to test my patience and loyalty. After a while, I got sick of it. Relationships are supposed to be about building each other up, not playing games. If she's testing you, that's a red flag. She's more interested in manipulating you than actually building a healthy relationship. Finally, let's talk about entitlement. If a woman acts like the world owes her something just for existing, that's a red flag. If she's constantly expecting you to cater to her every whim, if she acts like you should be grateful just to be in her presence, that's not someone you want to be with. A sense of entitlement is a huge red flag because it shows she doesn't appreciate you or anything you do for her. Relationships are about give and take, not one person constantly taking while the other gives. I knew a guy who was dating a girl like this. She acted like she was royalty and he was just lucky to be in her presence. She never thanked him for anything, never appreciated the effort he put in, and always expected more. He eventually realized that no matter what he did, it was never going to be enough for her because she felt entitled to everything. He got out of that relationship, and let me tell you, he was a lot happier for it. Alright, guys, I think I've given you enough to chew on for today. Just remember, red flags aren't necessarily deal breakers, but they're warnings. They're things you need to pay attention to. It's up to you to decide how big or small each red flag is, and whether or not you can deal with it. Some of them might not be a big deal, but others are signs that you're heading for trouble. Don't ignore them, thinking things will magically get better. They won't. Thanks for tuning in to Deeper Links. If you enjoyed this episode and want more of the raw truth, make sure to like, subscribe, and share this with your buddies. They need to hear this too. Catch you in the next one.